amongst all the religions in the world, or all the spiritual traditions, or all the paths of mysticism, is it that some of them are right and some of them are wrong? How can they coexist? What about if I practice this but someone else is practicing that? Does it mean that one of us are going to be missing out? How do we see the variety of ways in which people try to spiritually connect in this world? And what does the Bhagavad-gita have to say about that? Thank you so much, everyone, for coming this evening. Thank you to Radhika for zoning us in. And yeah, we have a little bit of time tonight to discuss something which I think will be really beautiful, really exciting, and hopefully relevant and useful to all of you as well. But before we begin, I don't know how many of you remember Family Fortunes? Anyone old enough to remember? Yeah, Ash puts his hand. Now we know how old you are. Yeah, they used to have this game show called Family Fortunes where they interviewed 100 people about a certain question, and then they found out which were the top answers. So I'm going to do a little Family Fortunes with all of you today. And the question on the table is, we asked 100 people, what do you do to relax? And what do you think the top answers were? Top answer wins a holiday to Barbados.
Oh.
Drink wine, okay. Intoxication, okay, wow.
I love the honesty.
There you go, intoxication. Sorry for my handwriting, I'm not intoxicated. But, watching TV, okay, my God. Straight in there. Number 2. Nature. It's a good one, I do it, but not the top 100 people.
We wish.
I don't know which part of London they were doing the survey in, but on their phones, that one didn't come up. Exercise, you would have thought that would have come up, but it didn't. Walking the dog didn't come up. Sleep, okay. There's one more, the top answer. Round of applause. You don't get a holiday though. Yes, a holiday. So, very interesting. These are the top 4 ways in which people in this world relax. So, I want you to look at all 4 of these activities. Do you see something in common between all 4 of them? They're all an escape, aren't they? Each one of these are all an escape from real life. When you go on holiday, you forget about your life back from, Monday to Friday. When you watch TV or a movie, you get absorbed in someone else's life and you forget about your life. When you take intoxication, it kind of puts you into another conscious state. And when you sleep, of course, you're switching off. So this is very, very interesting. If you look at the way in which people are actually trying to relax in this world, what people are essentially trying to do is escape the world. Isn't it interesting? But the reality of life is that you can't be on a perpetual holiday. At some point, you got to come back. How long does a movie go on for? An hour, 2 hours? If it's Bollywood, 3 hours. How long does intoxication last? It's there, but then there's the morning after, the night before. And how long can you sleep for? At one point you have to wake up. So although we use these things to relax, there's a sense in which they don't give us a permanent space, a permanent a disconnect from this world. They may give us a little bit of a respite, but then we come back to our life and then we seek it again, and then we come back and then we seek it again. And this is actually incredibly deep. It's incredibly telling, because there's a famous actually Christian writer called C.S. Lewis. Many of you know C.S. Lewis. And he says in a very famous quote, "If I find within myself a desire which no experience of this world can fulfill, then I must conclude I was made for another world. And so this simple exercise teaches all of us that actually what we seek in our essence is connection with something separate from this world. And therefore, whether we call it spirituality, or whether we call it religion, or whether we call it yoga, all of these things are actually meant for connection to something higher. The word religion comes from the Latin ligare, which means to again connect. Yoga comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, which means to join. And spirituality means to go beyond the physical, metaphysical, to go beyond and to access a different place. So all of us, whatever we do, we're actually looking for this connection. So some of us will call ourselves yogis. Any yogis in the room? Yeah, we may call ourselves yogis. We may call ourselves religious. And some people may say SBNR, spiritual, but not religious. But essentially, whether you're spiritual, religious, or yoga, if you're doing it for the essence of what that thing is meant for, we're all looking for the same thing, which is connection. And therefore, the ancient teachers explained that there are many, many different ways to connect in this world. And today we're going to be discussing the question, amongst all the religions in the world, or all the spiritual traditions, or all the paths of mysticism, is it that some of them are right and some of them are wrong? How can they coexist? What about if I practice this but someone else is practicing that? Does it mean that one of us are going to be missing out? How do we see the variety of ways in which people try to spiritually connect in this world? And what does the Bhagavad-gita have to say about that? And that's basically what we're going to be discussing today. Is that all right? Is that interesting for you? Yeah. It's not just going to be me talking all the time. I'm just going to present you with some ideas of how we see the diversity of spirituality in the world. And then we're going to open it up for some questions. If I asked you the question, just forget about divinity for a second, relationships of this world, what would you say some of the key drivers are, or the key things which kind of drive our relationships in this world? Good, bad, or whatever? Yeah. Love. There we go, straight to the essence. Yes. Love is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, connecting or driving force between individuals. Why else do you think people may connect together? People may decide to have a relationship with each other, apart from love. Think about the people you connected with today, the people you spoke to, the people you had a relationship with. Why was it that you were connecting with them? Why did you even have a conversation with them? Say it again. A common interest, so personality, yeah, very good. Same goal. Okay, so you're like-minded. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
People you serve or treat with love.
People you serve or you treat, you have some gratitude for them, some sense of wanting to do something for them. Yeah, let's put that one in. Gratitude. And I'll also put here duty. Any others? Support, to help each other and to, be there for each other. Yeah. There's something else here?
Not to feel alone.
Not to feel alone, to have companionship. Yeah. To learn from each other. What would you say are some of the, maybe what you'd classify as less noble reasons why we connect with others? Dependency, yeah? In other words, you want to get something from them.
Money, 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 money.
Desire. Yeah, let's say desire. Anything else?
Control.
Control? Yeah, and control linked to that. We can also say fear. In the ancient Vedic literatures, it said that there is a spectrum of relationships that we have in this world, and broadly speaking, they go through this spectrum. In Sanskrit, fear is known as bhaya, desire is known as asha, gratitude or duty is known as kartavya, and love is known as prema.
By the way, if anyone wants some paper and a pen, just put your hand up and Nandini Gokul will give you some.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a kind of continuum going on here. So if you think about your life, there are some relationships which are just mainly, they're there out of fear. I hope it's not your boss at work, but that could be an example. There are some relationships that we have just because we know we'll get something. There's a mutual benefit. There's a transactional reason. There are some relationships which we have because we feel indebted. We feel, no, I should. So much has been given, I should also give. And there are some relationships in which there's none of these agendas. You just feel impelled from the heart, from within, to want to be with that person.
Past life connection.
Past life connection, yeah, sometimes we resonate with people like this. So, and oftentimes what happens in relationships, there will be elements of all of these, but one will predominate. Now here we can actually see that what's happening is there's actually a progression. On this side of the scale, it's more about me. And as we move along the scale, it becomes more about both of us. On this side of the scale, we can say there's a lot of self-motivation. And as we move along, the self-motivation gets less and less, and then we can say here it becomes selfless. Here often on this side of the scale, it's a lot about externals. But as we move along the scale, the quality of the relationships becomes more and more about the internals. And also we can say on this side of the scale, oops. Oh, let's go back. Oh, no. Yep. Oop. Yep. Got it. And on this side of the scale, we can say it's very impersonal. We're not really connecting to the heart of that person, their characteristics, their qualities, their unique individuality. But as we go more along this scale here, it becomes more and more personal. Before we even talk about connecting with divinity, this model can also help you in your life just to look at your relationships. The more we have relationships in our life which are tending and moving towards the right, the more in a relationship where even if we are on the left-hand side but we're progressing towards the right-hand side, then we can understand we're going to reach more and more fulfillment. Actually, the quality of our life is all determined by relationships. It doesn't really matter how much you have, how many achievements you've managed to gather, or what accolades you have or positions. Really, all of those things only matter if you have others you can share it with and you have loving connections. So the first kind of thing I just wanted to share with you today is that at one point try to do a kind of an analysis of your relationships and try to see how we can move along this scale so it can become more selfless and more about we than more just about me. But why am I sharing this with you today in the context of today's discussion? Because it said just as we connect with people in this world for different reasons, we also in the world find different spiritual paths which allow people to connect with divinity for different reasons. Just as we, as I said, have we approach different people because we have a different thing on our mind, people are also approaching divinity with a different thing on their mind. And therefore we find there are a variety of spiritual paths in this world. There are a variety of religions. There are a variety of different practices and mystic paths. which all help someone to achieve connection with divinity, but all of them are somewhere along this scale. All of them are helping us to connect with divinity according to what we want to get at this point in time. And in that way, what the ancient Vedic teachers explain is that there are many, many different religions in the world because there's many, many different types of people who are looking for many, many different types of things and who have a varied motivation within their heart. And so the Vedic teachers say it's not that one religion is right and everyone else is wrong. That would be that would be fanatical. That also doesn't just resonate with our experience, because we see spirituality in a variety of religions. At the same time, the Vedic teachers tell us that it's not that every religion is exactly the same, and it doesn't matter what you practice, every path will ultimately lead to the same destination. That would also be an extreme. Rather, what the Vedic teachers explain is that there are a variety of spiritual paths in the world which all can give one divine connection, but give people different varieties and different degrees of spiritual connection. And therefore, it's not that one religion is good and one religion is bad. It's just that there are different religions for people who are looking for different things. And therefore, we'll find that some religions on this side of the scale are very much driven by fear. Even in some religions, they talk about it. He was a God-fearing person, or she was a God-fearing person. And therefore, the connection with divinity is very much based on a sense of fear. And then we find that a lot of spirituality sometimes is based around desire. That, someone is approaching divine connection either for a very physical benefit, they want to achieve something in their life, or sometimes for another type of more subtle benefit. They want peace of mind, or they want to be free from stress. But nevertheless, there's a motivation, there's a desire. Then we see some spirituality is about gratitude. It's about a sense of feeling that one has been invested in, one has received so much, and therefore, as an exhibition of one's gratitude, one should give back. But then it said that the highest type of spirituality is spirituality which is a connection that we're trying to establish, which is unmotivated, which is simply out of love. A type of connection in which it's not transactional. It's not about what I'm going to get, what I'm going to lose out on, or even what I've already received. All of those things become inconsequential. In love, it's just a sense of falling, becoming enchanted by the other person's or divinity's character, and divinity then reciprocating in that way, and then engaging in the deepest, most intimate type of relationship. And so this is how the Vedic teachers help us to understand the variety of spirituality and religious traditions in the world. And the Bhagavad-gita, sometimes ancient teachers have compared it to a jewel box. So if you think of this as a jewel box, then it said that the base of the jewel box is known as karma yoga, which is described in the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-gita. So karma yoga means that yoga of action, how to connect all of your daily activities to divinity. Then it said that the final 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-gita are known as jnana yoga, 13 to 18, or the yoga of the intellect, the yoga of discrimination, the yoga of how to become detached from this world, and the yoga of how to let go of the temporary in search for the eternal. But what the commentators explain is that the jewel inside is known as bhakti yoga, or the yoga of love. And so That's the real jewel that is found within the ancient scripture of the Bhagavad-gita. And bhakti, or love, which is obviously what we're all gathering here on these nights to cultivate, is actually what the soul seeks for in its in the deepest, innermost core of its being. What we're all really, really seeking is to give love and to receive love. But what we find in the world is that there's so much frustrated love, there's so much love that doesn't feel like it's being reciprocated, there's so much love which then turns into pain and bitterness. And in that way, although we feel this need for love, we always seem to be frustrated in that attempt. And so what the Bhagavad-gita kind of helps us to understand is that when we connect as spiritual beings with the divine in a relationship of love or bhakti, then the love that we experience in that relationship with the divine then allows us to have loving relationships with everyone and everything around us. In other words, it's almost like if you shine a laser beam into a diamond, then when you shine that laser beam into the diamond, then that light ends up reflecting and going in all directions. And so the idea of the ancient teachers of the East is that when love is directed to divinity, and when we achieve that connection, then that love is experienced in all the relationships and interactions of this world. But if we try to experience love here without divine connection, then we'll always feel some level of dissatisfaction and disappointment. And so, in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna right in the middle of the Bhagavad-gita offers this very, very beautiful verse which helps us to understand what this connection with divinity looks like. So would you all like to repeat it after me? Yeah? So we'll do it together. We'll go line by line. Patram pushpam phalam toyam
Patram pushpam phalam toyam
Yo me bhaktya prayachati
Yo me bhaktya prayachati
Tadaham bhakti upaditam
Tadam bhakti upaditam
Ashnami prayatat manaha
Ashnami prayatatmana.
So this is chapter 9, right in the middle of the Bhagavad-gita. And remember, it's a jewel box. So the jewel of the Bhagavad-gita is right in the middle. And right in the middle of the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, if one offers me with love and devotion, a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it. You see here in this verse, the word bhakti appears twice. And that, the commentators say, is to accentuate and to highlight what is the essence of a relationship. It's the heart, it's the sincerity of purpose, it's the intention. In relationships, it's about intention over action. And therefore, Krishna here is saying in the Bhagavad-gita that spirituality and spiritual connection in its essence is actually very, very simple. All we have to do is we have to give our love, we have to give our heart, we have to give our purity of consciousness in service to the other. And in that connection of love, we actually experience a type of happiness and contentment which otherwise is very, very elusive in this world. And so these are just some initial comments that I wanted to share with you about why there are different religions in the world. Because basically we all have different motivations in approaching divinity. And so different paths help us to fulfill those objectives. And then those paths then navigate us through their teachings to higher levels of connecting with divinity. And so almost there's this continuum and a variety of spirituality in the world.
I think that deserves a round of applause, don't you? Yeah, I'm acting now a little bit as the instigator, the person that doesn't so much believe. But I think that before we do that, I just have this intuition that it would be nice to just turn to someone you don't know, and it's important, please do it with someone you don't know, and just very honestly, very candidly discuss what went in or what struck you. Maybe there was something that triggered you. Maybe there was something there that was like, I don't know. And that's good, because this is the space in which we're going to try and open this up. That's the whole point of this. There's not just, we're here to give you everything and then, yeah, you have to just swallow it, come what may. But it's good to churn it a little, I think. So I think if you can turn to someone you don't know, please do this. It'll be awkward for all of 1 minute. And just discuss with them very openly what struck you, what do you agree with, what challenged you, yeah? Just for 2 minutes, please. Good conversation? Interesting. Nice to talk to someone new, isn't it? You know, you came with maybe some of you came alone, but still nice to meet someone at the very least. What were you talking about? Let's hear it. Your thoughts, your moments of impact, something that was perhaps really, that struck you in a nice way, and also it'd be interesting to get into some, what are the challenges, what are the things that maybe didn't quite stick or still need some development of thought. The floor is open.
Yeah.
What we talked about is that if you connect with God, you said, and then it becomes easier to connect with other souls. But then the point we discuss is that say someone doesn't believe in God, and if their philosophy is if you're a good person, then that's a good way of doing things. Then where do you sort of look at that?
For example, the sun. The sun has an energy, the sun has light, and the sun is also a globe. So all of those elements are part of the sun. And so sometimes people are connecting to divinity more in not necessarily a personal way, but they're seeing that there's something beyond, some spiritual essence, some spiritual consciousness, some spiritual energy. And in that way, that is also a level of spiritual connection, because it's going beyond just the immediate kind of material situation that we're in. And therefore, divinity is multifaceted. Divinity has many different aspects, and as I mentioned, there are different ways in which people connect to divinity. But what the Bhagavad-gita does explain is that if what we want to experience at our deepest level is love, then for there to be love, there has to be personality, because love happens in exchange. Love happens in relationships between individuals. Love happens in service and selflessness. And therefore, that opportunity to experience love generally comes when our understanding of divinity evolves in a more personal way. But you're absolutely right that many people may not connect to a personal divinity, but still classify themselves as spiritual, and that's absolutely perfectly fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I have nothing to add on that. What, did you have any responses? Does that sit right with you?
Thank you.
Any other thoughts?
So, can you just share really quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So we spoke in the context of work, from moving from fear to desire, and so we were just explaining how we spend a lot of time at work and we expect reciprocation, especially when we put in so much effort and time and energy. And we were just discussing that it's really hard to get to this point of becoming selfless at work. And so we were sharing how when you expect reciprocation from people when you put in so much effort. I mean, I work in a college and I run a whole careers department, so you constantly working with young people. You expect some kind of like reward or reciprocation. And we were just discussing how in your own self, irrespective of everybody else, like fear to love, and the way that you could do that is kind of taking care of yourself first, feeling, self-care and filling your cup of tea first, and then sort of the idea of like whatever you do is special to me, and therefore reducing the need, for others to kind of give you that love and that gratitude and that appreciation. That's what we were discussing. If you'd like to share any thoughts about that.
I mean, it would be interesting to unpack it, because from what I understood of what I just captured from what you said, right? You're saying that within ourselves, we can move from fear to love without the need of externals. And let me unpack it. Did you mean like, okay, there's no need for spiritual institution, there's no need for community, there's no need for the association of others, we can do it on our own from fear to love?
There is a need for all of those elements, because ultimately we are having relationships. But is that level of personalism that you would want in the workplace would start when you have that level of personalism within yourself first.
Yeah. Just to backtrack on a few things he said, the world we live in is incredibly exploitative. And that has left a scar on each one of us. There's a joke that once the employees were watching from the top floor, and out the window they saw the boss driving in with a brand spanking new Mercedes. So they were all, their jaws dropped, and anyway the boss came in, so they all surrounded him, and he said, "Oh, you like the car?" They said, yeah, we love the car. So the boss looked at them and said, "Well, next year, if you work harder, if you work longer, if you work with your heart, then next year I'll have an even bigger car." And he goes, "Oh my God, so exploitative." So that's the world we live in. It's we're constantly being taken from. And it's very, very interesting that what happens is that scars our relationships in this world, and it also scars our relationship with divinity. Because in this world we've been exploited so much, it's so hard in this world to actually give ourselves selflessly, even when we want to, because we always have that fear that maybe I need to hold back, maybe someone's going to take advantage, maybe someone's... And therefore also love, what we share with people is that love doesn't happen overnight. Love is a process. Love is a daily habit. Love happens in stages. And therefore it's all about actually a gradual unveiling of love, and developing trust and developing confidence. And it's the same with the divine as well. And therefore sometimes people feel that, what we're doing here is we're trying to grade religions and say like one religion is a lower religion because it's more about desire, whereas this religion's a higher religion because it's all about love. But the idea is that we need different things to move along that scale. We need to evolve our consciousness in different ways so that we can give ourselves without fear of, being exploited. And so, I really appreciate your point that we find this type of selflessness so rare in spirituality and so rare in the relationships of this world, because we have had so many bad experiences, and we have to learn how to kind of work through that and go through those stages of love. Yeah, thank you.
I love how you shared that love is a practice. It's
Yeah.
a daily practice, and I think so much of the time we attribute love to being an emotion that just kind of plonks upon us. The clouds will part, the sun rays will dash upon my forehead, and I'll be like, I'm in love, I'm feeling the love, But the reality is that, exactly how Mara spoke, that it's a daily practice. Teach me how to love you should be our prayer. When our eyes open in the morning, the first words we utter are usually, who's going to like my post today? Who's going to comment on my social media post today? Or I wonder what's going to go down at work. Wouldn't it be amazing? Wouldn't it be incredible if we all rose in the morning and the first thing we uttered was, Dear God, their divinity, their absolute truth, their universe, teach me how to love you. That may this day be a day of loving awareness. Right? Now, attributed to that, maybe there has to be a practice. Because maybe that one sentence alone, over some time, it might work for a week, might work for a month, but I just saw someone smiling at me because they know exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, after some time it becomes robotic, no? It becomes so easy to just slip into a motivation of going, teach me how to love you, you know. Get over with it, you know, get on with it. There's so many things to do, no need for that prayer today. And so that's why this process of spiritual practice is so much at the forefront of what we hear and what we teach in Bhakti Yoga. That there has to be, at the same time as a sentiment, there has to be a philosophy, there has to be some sort of grounding, there has to be a practice. Like, you know, yoga people say the hardest part is to get on the mat, but once you get on the mat, that's where the magic happens, right? And in the same way, for me anyway, bhakti really happens with the mantra. I can tell, yesterday I didn't chant so much, and I could tell the words that were coming out of my mouth were a little bit harsh. I wasn't so much in loving awareness. I had to kind of check myself on a regular basis. I think it's so important that we sometimes reflect, you know? That what am I doing? Like, let's be honest, like if we write that on a piece of paper and say, what am I doing to practice love on a daily basis? And it has to be substantial. It can't just be one sentence. It can't just be something loose and airy-fairy, and as some people are calling it now, woo-woo. You know, it can't just be like, love and love and love. But let's get real with it. What does that mean? What does that mean? And so I think it's imperative, even if you don't fall into a practice of mantra, to just reflect on this question. What is my practice to bring about loving awareness? What is that practice that's going to move me from bhaya to prema, from fear to love? What is that practice? Any thoughts?
Yeah, and just to kind of pick up on another of your points, like in the world today, they talk about random acts of kindness.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this actually some time ago, and random acts of kindness are actually deeply rooted in spiritual culture, because the idea is that what spiritualists try to do is build impressions of how beautiful selflessness is. Like when we joined the monastery, one of the things that was one of the rules is that everyone had to serve lunch like once a week to everyone else. And it was a very powerful experience because, you know, like sometimes it comes to lunchtime and you're just like, let's face it, you're just hungry, you know? And it's like, oh my God, now I've got to serve everyone else. And then, you know, the cook hasn't made enough and you're kind of serving it all out and the pot's becoming slowly empty and you start becoming very quickly quite miserly about how much you give. And so all these emotions are going through you. But it was incredible because what we realized is that when you actually served, by the end, once everyone was served, you actually felt like, you know what, I'm not that hungry, you know? So there you go, there's a great dieting technique. If you want to try that. But it was beautiful because I realized that these are the kind of acts that ancient spiritual traditions give us to help us taste what selflessness is like. Because we've lost that taste, we've lost awareness of how beautiful selflessness is, because we're living in a dog-eat-dog world where it seems like selfishness is the only way to go. It's the me society. So that's another thing I would say, that what we can do in our life is build more and more impressions of the beauty of selflessness in our divine connection and in our relationships with others, and let that become more and more a part of your being.
One of my dear friends, he's in the room, I can't tell you who because he'll get really embarrassed, but it was his birthday recently. And I asked him, what are you going to do on your birthday? What's the plans? Like we had a plan in the evening to go out for dinner. But I asked him, what will you do during the day? And he said, I want to serve the monks in the monastery. And I was like, what? Like I'm part of the same tradition, like I'm trying to be a bhakti yogi, but it really struck me that I think that this is a nice principle, no? That on a day where ordinarily it's all about self-absorption, It's all about me, sitting at the front of the bus, back of the church, in the center of attention. On a day where it's specifically all about you, to go out and serve, to go out and be of service. There's this wonderful project in London called Food for Life London. Has anyone heard of this? Show of hands. Okay, this is I think Raj Mukunda, you're involved with that, aren't you? Okay, so Raj Mukunda, he's your man. You want to go and speak to him. They have this amazing van from which they go out onto the streets once a week, every day. Every day, but there's a massive effort that happens on a particular Sunday or Saturday or something. And they set up shop somewhere and they go and just serve the food. I think that's incredible. I think every single person in this room should book in a day with Raj Mukunda to go and serve food. If you've never done it, if you've never served people because you think, oh, I'm not really a waiter, like I didn't go to university to become a waiter, but just the act of service, it will soften the heart. You know, it will soften the heart. I think that's incredible. So yeah, definitely check that out, Food for Life London. Any other questions? Any other? Yeah, where is it? I saw this hand first, sorry.
So it was two things.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about in relation to our connection with the divine, that it can be quite easy to be in gratitude. So when you're looking at everything that you've been given, it's you know it's easy to be in a place of gratitude. But when things are taken away, it's really hard to love anyone. And the second point, or the thing that we struggle with a little bit, is this idea that you can't have any meaningful connections in this world unless you have a very strong divine connection. So for me personally, I understand it in theory that to the degree I'm deeply rooted, to the degree that I'm deeply nourishing myself, to the degree that I'm full, I will be less conditional in relationships. But personally, I still struggle with the fact that, okay, you know, I cannot have a satisfying, meaningful connection with another person unless I have this very strong, tangible, divine connection.
Yeah, beautiful points. Just on your first point, like it's easy to be grateful when we've received, but what about when things are taken away? What about when things are going wrong? What about when life is turned upside down? And yeah, you touch on perhaps one of the biggest causes of why people turn away from divinity is a sense of letdown in their life, a sense of neglect, a sense of why do bad things happen to good people, which means why do bad things happen to me, because I'm a good person. And so, yeah, how do we deal with divine connection when we feel that sense of being let down, or we feel as though divinity is not alive, active, attentive, affectionate? In those situations, we take help in different ways. One way we take help is from other spiritual people who do have divine connection. They say it's difficult to see the picture when you're inside the frame. So in any situation of life, whether it's frustration with divinity, or whether it's frustration with a situation, or whether it's frustration with another person, one of the best things we can always do is go to another person who's out of that emotional state. And what they help you to see is not just the difficulties or the obstacles or the letdowns, but they let you also see the beauty, the opportunity, the positivity in that situation. Another thing we do when we feel that we don't have the gratitude, we feel let down, is we reflect on our life and we see how we have a certain perception of how we should be serviced in our life. We make all these prayers, and when these prayers aren't fulfilled, or they transpire in different ways, we feel like we're not being cared for. Saint Teresa of Avila, she says, more tears were shed from prayers that were answered than from prayers that went unanswered. Because often we pray for the wrong things, we want the wrong things, we vision the wrong things for our life, and then when it transpires in a different way, we feel let down. But through wisdom, through reflection, we can actually understand how every time there's a no from divinity, it's trying to divert our attention to a bigger yes, a bigger door of opportunity. So that's just on your first point. And then on your second point, yeah, how do we really give ourselves to others when we don't feel necessarily that reciprocation or connection with the divine? Of course, it's not all or nothing. We're getting some reciprocation from the divine and we're reflecting that in our relationships. But the basic problem of the world today is that practically all of us have become very, very insecure. Everyone in this world is suffering from different degrees of insecurity, incompleteness, because of our weak connection with divinity. And therefore we try to make up that weakness of connection with divinity and that incompleteness and that insecurity by seeking appreciation, by seeking attention, by seeking acknowledgement, by seeking all of these things, acceptance from others. And so I would say it's step by step. As we become more connected, as we feel more love, as we feel the nourishment, then we give more in our relationships here without so much expectation. And as we give more, then we receive more, and we give more in the divine relationship. And so it's building like that. So as we were mentioning, love is not just an overnight magical state of consciousness that's instilled within us, but it's a daily habit that works towards the full awakening of it, like that.
There was another hand up as well. Yeah?
Hare Krishna.
Hare
I
Krishna.
heard that love always depends on acceptance. So every day I'm chanting my God's name, Lord Krishna's name. Every day I remember him. I say to him, I love you, my Krishna, I love you, my Krishna. How I understand how he accepts my love. How Lord Krishna accepts my love.
Yeah, I wish I knew.
I heard that love always depends on acceptance. So how I understand? Love, God also loves me.
So when you connect with divinity by making an endeavor from your heart, how do you know that divinity is accepting that love and reciprocating with it? Well, it's like if I ask you, when you eat, how do you know that you've digested the food? How do you know?
Also about feelings.
Yeah, but what do you feel when you digest? How do you know?
I'm not hungry after eating.
Right, so you don't feel your hunger disappears, you feel energy, you feel some plenty, yeah, you feel happy. So in one sense, we don't need to overanalyze Krishna or divinity reciprocates by allowing you to experience the feelings of happiness, pleasure, freedom. These are the things that one will experience. So there's an ancient analogy given in a verse. It's a very beautiful verse. I'll say it for you. Bhakti pareshan ubhavo virakti ranyatra chesha trika eka kalaha prapadyamanasya yathashnatashus tusti pustikshut apayonubhasham. This analogy is given in the ancient literature known as the Bhagavad. And it said that when someone eats, three things happen. Tushti, you feel some sense of pleasure. Pushti, you feel nourishment and energy. And Shud apayo, you feel freedom from hunger. And in the same way, when you're connecting with divinity, when you're offering your love to divinity, then the same three things will happen. You'll feel pleasure. You'll feel experience and connection and nourishment of your soul. And you'll feel freedom from material duality, material tribulation. You know that divinity is reciprocating with your love because the waves and the roller coaster of this world will become insignificant to you because you've now connected with something beyond. And so in this way we'll be able to understand that that connection is becoming very strong.
Thank you.
I saw one gentleman in the audience really nodding furiously. Yeah, I think that this is nice, no? Like, one thing that really came to mind for me was, I think some of us can sit and think and just go, really? Is this going to really be possible to feel this connection and nourishment and freedom from material calamity? But it's really like this, that you have to go to the honeybees if you want to find the honey. You know, if I were to give you a lotus flower and say, please extract the nectar from this lotus flower, it's an example that I share often because it's very dear to my heart. But if you were given a lotus flower and told, please extract the nectar from it, you could try it with a pestle and mortar, you could try it by boiling the flower, you could try it by any number of chemical means to try and receive that nectar out of the lotus flower, that amrita, the sweetness, let's call it, from the lotus flower. But really the easiest way is to just find nearby honeybees. They already know how to do it. And so even though it may sound a little lofty, like, oh really, a connection with God? Free from material calamities, really? It's possible? I think then the question has to come, let me go in search of those who are practicing such a process, that are living it. I think sometimes we can discount and say there's no such thing as saints, there's no such thing as a bona fide sage in this world. It's all bogey yogis out there, you know, trying to get an Instagram following. But the reality is that we walk among saints. We walk among saints. We just have to ding, open the eyes a little bit, ding, open the ears a little bit, and before you know it, you might bump into one somewhere along the road, especially if you're desiring it. There has to be a desire for that. If there's no desire for any of the stuff that we're speaking about this evening, then why would it come? It's, you know, the rule of manifestation is you have to first desire it. It has to be there in your heart that, yes, I want to be free from material contaminations. Yes, I want a higher connection. I truly desire it. I really want it in my life. And then before you know it, somehow mystically things start to shift and change, and you'll fall into the association of those like-minded souls, and before you know it, you're rising, you're bubbling above, you're rising away from all of those calamities that trouble all the others that you have connection with in your life. So find saints. I think it's, yeah, that was what inspired me about what you said. I like being with you. I think you're a saintly person. I saw another question somewhere out there. Yes?
It's a bit of a simple question, so I apologise in advance. Keshava, you talk about moving from fear to love.
Yeah.
Go through that transition, essentially. When we move more towards love, we become more and more selfless. But as we become more and more selfless, we start to help others, and we start to put others before ourselves. That starts to become more and more difficult because we're giving up our time, we're living in a conventional world for most of us. How do we manage that? Because what tends to happen is we get absorbed totally, we get more and more people asking us for help, more and more people wanting things from us, which then can have a damaging effect on our health, and then we're not then able to help others. So the analogy regarding put your own mask on first before putting on your child's mask comes to mind to me. How do you keep achieving that? Because the more we move towards love, the more we radiate other people want to help from us, and then the more we then become damaged ourselves. So what's your thoughts on that? Because I find that very difficult to sort of see what happens and what we should be doing.
Oh, thank you so much. Such a beautiful, yeah. I've memorized the mask thing, you know, I've been on like 50 flights in like 4 months. I know that whole speech, yeah. But you're absolutely right. There is a need for self-love. You see, like we're also thinking about love, but unless we care for ourselves, unless we're situated well, we can't really selflessly give to others. And therefore we should realize that yes, we have to take time for ourselves. We have to be in a good space. We have to take care of ourselves physically, emotionally. And that's not selfish. It's only selfish if that becomes your final aim. But if your ultimate aim in taking care of yourself is then to go out in the world and serve others in a better way, then that taking care of yourself is part of your service to others. So please, yes, do take your time and do take your space, and otherwise we get fatigued. We fade in our ability to give ourselves to others because it just becomes more and more draining. But having said that, I do want to share something with you. The most elevated spiritualists in the world, when they find a way of giving, that comes from the deepest core of their being, and which comes as a complete expression of their compassion. In other words, they're giving not to receive something back, but they're giving with the highest purity of actually just wanting to see that person flourish. And you'll also get a glimpse of this, that actually giving becomes your receiving. And I'll share a poem with you. Someone sent this to me some time ago. This is called Given To, and it's by someone called Ruth Berbermeyer. So this is what she says. I never feel more given to than when you take from me. When you understand the joy I feel giving to you. And you know my giving isn't done to put you in debt, but because I want to live the love I feel for you. To receive with grace may be the greatest giving. There's no way I can separate the two. When you give to me, I give you my receiving. When you take from me, I feel so given to. So that is actually, it's an incredible, I'll just share with you, like yesterday was the 26th of June? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yesterday was like my 1 year anniversary of taking like lifetime vows of renunciation. So it was a day of reflection. And someone asked me on Sunday, like, what is your reflection after 1 year of like, living in the renounced order? And I said I got a glimpse of how giving is actually the biggest receiving. I said to them, I got a glimpse of how when you give from the deepest part of your being, then in that giving you feel, you tap into a divine energy which just fuels you to want to give more. And that's why you see the greatest saints are able to give ceaselessly, tirelessly. But until we get to that point, I do agree with you that we need to find a balance and we need to find some self-care. And then eventually it just becomes very natural. So yeah, just some thoughts on that. Yeah.
I'm in a situation in my life where I have 2 little babies, very cute. I find it hard to pry myself away from them sometimes. And somewhat immaturely, I think, I packed my schedule. Like while you were all discussing the last question, I can't remember what it was. We were just, reflecting what Maharaj was sharing. He asked me, said, so it's a busy time for you? I said, yeah, the summertime's like my busiest period. It's like festivals, retreats, outdoor events, kirtan here on a Friday night. I basically don't have any time to breathe. It sometimes feels like that. Like if I'm not at an event, I'm planning for an event, because not being a Swami means that I tend not to have a good team. Like, you have to kind of do everything yourself a little bit. And so it's, it's intense. But I can very much from personal experience ascribe to what Maharaj just said, that in this giving, it sometimes feels like, I sat here, my eyes are heavy, what will I say, like what will come out? But somehow, if I just have a little faith that with some good intention, I'm here to serve, I'm here to give, I'm here to love, right? Then I think the words are made and sown by something greater than myself. Oftentimes people will come and say, that kirtan, wow. I'm completely, this is not humility speaking, I'm just being completely candid and dead honest with you. I'm not even in the kirtan, I'm completely thinking about something else. But I have a little faith, just a tiny little smidgen of faith, that if you go out and give with some love and care and with the intention to serve and uplift and rise, not only others but yourself, that, let me tell it to you this way, I heard it from Keshava Swami, so I feel authorized to say it. There are different types of friends. There's a type of friend who, when you leave their house, will say bye to you at the door. There's a second type of friend that when you leave the house, they'll come to the car, they'll open the door, they'll see you in the car, close the door, and off you'll go. And a third type of friend, the most intimate type of friend, according to Vedic culture, is one who not only says bye at the door, not only closes the door behind you in the car, but will go half the way with you. And you know what? Divinity is that third type of friend. Taking one step in that direction towards a relationship and friendship and love and connection with divinity, it's like 0.5 times the reciprocation. You can feel there's something in your heart. You know, it's just like that gentleman asked, how do you know whether there's kind of a reciprocation, a relationship, but how can you know God's happy, basically? And I think it's categorically, if you're just open to it, to receiving, seeing what comes through, you'll see that 0.5%, God will walk that halfway with you. I heard it in one of your lectures. This is fully your content.
Oh, you said it better than me.
Is there one more in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Just following up on that, at what point is giving too much where you know you're being exploited by someone and your kindness or goodness is they're almost using you and you kind of feel resentment afterwards, right? Because you know it's happening. So have you experienced that in your life and then how do you deal with it?
Yeah, sometimes it can be a service not to serve someone.
I love that.
When we're trying to serve others, what we're trying to do actually is help them to become the best versions of themselves. When a child continually wants sweets and a parent says no, that's service. Because that's a teaching, that's a way of elevating that child to a higher understanding of the best way to live. So sometimes in our life, when there are people who are very exploitative, then we have to deal with them in such a way that they can improve. They can realize that that kind of life, that kind of attitude, that kind of approach is not going to bring them contentment on a deep level. And sometimes that may mean you need to also sometimes withdraw. But it's not a withdrawal out of bitterness. If we withdraw out of bitterness, then we may have done the right thing, but we've done it with the wrong motivation, and therefore we still lose. But if we withdraw knowing that I have to withdraw right now for this person's benefit, then we not only help that person, but we also spiritually grow in our withdrawal. And so there's a difference between walking away from someone and running away from someone. When we run away from something, it's out of fear, it's out of disgust, it's out of bitterness, but when we walk away, we're walking away with intelligence, knowing that in this situation, this is the best. So yeah, service is not stereotyped. And in different situations, service will look very, very different. And the main thing is the motivation and the desire to want to really contribute and help that person to be the best they can. I hope that helps.
I've got nothing more on that. What do we do now?
There's another question, but I don't know.
Oh yeah,
Kirtan,
yeah.
or-
We got time now?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sorry, so you said that there's when our relationship with God becomes more strengthened and we have this prema inside, then our relationship with everyone becomes also in that way, right? Yeah, like is there an analogy for that dispersion of loving exchange? And is because we don't live in a vacuum in our daily mode of movement, wherever you're at. So is our daily interaction with people also informing us of how we can relate with God? Like what can we do to actually practice that?
Yeah. Can you bring up do it anyway?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what does this mean when we connect to divinity, that our relationships in this world flourish? The depth of any relationship is proportionate to the commitment and selflessness in that relationship. Okay. Srila Prabhupada, our teacher, he often said the purest type of love in this world is the love between a mother and a child, because that level of selflessness is often unparalleled. No matter how, whether the child is reciprocating or responsive or, responsible, the mother just keeps giving and giving, because the selflessness and commitment has reached a pinnacle level, which means the relationship is very, very deep. So what happens is, when we're drawing from the divine, when we feel loved, when we know divinity loves me, when you have, if someone can say that, I just know God loves me. And if one has that deep conviction, then it means when they're relating to everyone in this world, they're not trying to get anything. They're going as a whole person, and therefore they're able to give. We often tell this poem of Mother Teresa, which maybe, I don't know, maybe you've read here as well. But apparently Mother Teresa had this poem by her bedside in the orphanage in Calcutta. And she writes, "People are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyway. If you find happiness, people may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. You see, in the end, it's between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway." So that's an incredible level of consciousness, that once you're connected to God, it's between me and divinity. And here I'm just giving. I'm not looking to get. And when you give, then, it transforms people. You can be with the most obnoxious person, but when you display a level of saintliness, it's almost like they're forced to come up to that level. Have you ever tried to be angry at a humble person? It's really difficult, It's you really want to be angry and they're just so humble. It's they force that humility within you by their saintliness. So there's a sense that when we're connecting with divinity, we then interact with people of this world with a certain fulfillment that's so rare, that's so spiritually attractive, that people just come up, and rise to that. So those were just some thoughts.